Uh, good, a- Good afternoon. This is Dana Reed with Operation Barbecue Relief. We're here today with the panel to discuss our recent COVID operations, our response in relation to the pandemic and its effect on employment and its depletion of a lot of food bank resources. Joining me today, we have David Marks, owner and operator of Famous Dave's Restaurant, David Eahart, Director of Communications and Brand Marketing, Seaboard Foods, Jarrid Collins, also known as Jay, Chief Program Officer, Operation Barbecue Relief, Christine Heiser, Mass Care Coordinator, Disability Integration Specialist, Department of Human Services. She's with the Bureau of Administrative Services and Division of Emergency Planning and Safety Operations in the state of Pennsylvania. And we have Kelly Aceto, who is an employee of Famous Dave Restaurants, worked through this operation, did a great job. And myself, again, Dana Reed, will be moderating. We're looking for a very engaging interaction here, kind of explain what we've been doing over the last 95 days or so, to the tune of about 4.5 million meals. Jay, would you like to get into and explain the Operation Restaurant Relief real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dana.
You're welcome.
So, OBR, generally speaking, had to make a pivot in what we normally do. Our standard traditional meals involves about a football field size footprint. So obviously that would not work. We found that the most engaging and effective way to do this was to work with local restaurants in the communities that had the need, bring them back online, pay for their employees, pay for the overhead of the restaurant, and provide them the raw food material. All in all, we had 27 restaurants we partnered with, I believe just south of 300 jobs brought back online. And as Dana mentioned, we did this to a tune of roughly 4.5 million meals across the United States. Now, many of these meals went through the state of Pennsylvania because of their ability to be proactive and get out in front of this as a state. And in the end, we're so thankful for that opportunity to really make a difference in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Jay. So the Operation Restaurant Relief Program was a new program to Operation Barbecue Relief, but certainly not new to what this organization, OBR as we affectionately call it, what we've been doing since 2011, which is providing mass care, more specifically feeding to victims, rescue workers, those affected by natural disasters. So this wasn't certainly terribly new. The problems or the hurdles we had to get over certainly were new to us, not having dealt with the pandemic and the effects of the quarantine, the sustainability, but also what a lot of relief agencies were dealing with, which was the demographics of the volunteer being a lot into the high risk population and really affecting our response from a volunteer asset standpoint. In reference to resources, product and protein, again, not new for Operation Barbecue Relief to reach out to one of our longstanding partners and supporters, Seaboard Foods, Prairie Fresh. David Eahart, can you get into a little bit of the details of what you've been doing with OBR since 2013 and how that kind of paved the way for this recent deployment?
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, we've been involved with OBR since about 2013. Actually, our first involvement was donating pork to them during the Moore tornado following that. And that was kind of when OBR was still young and very much an infant. And we were, I'd say, pretty naive on how we would donate as a company. We were asked for the donation. We really didn't know how to go about it, the logistics of it, which early on were one of the biggest challenges of how to actually go forward and get product out. We've learned a lot since then. That first donation was 10,000 pounds of ground pork. And since then, we officially became the official pork supplier to OBR around 2015, 2016, and have donated a little over about close to 750,000 pounds of product to them for the deployments. So early on, when this situation occurred, we were ready to jump in and see how we could support them. Although primarily most of our involvement has been with major deployments in the past, which we actually have fine-tuned that process over the years.
Excellent. And how has the employee involvement and engagement over the last couple of years, how has that changed, and how does that help with this recent deployment?
Yes. So for us, one of the biggest challenges is we're moving truckloads of pork. So I mentioned it was 10,000 pounds, which is about a quarter of a truckload, that first deployment. Now we have multiple truckloads going out. And early on, I had to explain, our leadership understood it, but our operations people, that involves everyone from those inside the plant to those that are actually scheduling product, to those, the transportation part of it. We have our own transportation division. And early on, I'd have to explain a lot, get really involved in that logistics of it now. But now I have a core team that actually, even before more of a traditional deployment with a natural disaster, we're watching the weather, we're watching forecast, we're in constant contact with OBR, and we're actually scheduling product out. We now have product in warehouses that OBR can pull almost immediately, so that, and they can start getting it staged for their, last year when we had the major hurricanes, we actually were staging product in the state of Georgia to go into Florida. So now I have a group that's really eager and engaged. We also do a lot of fundraising for OBR. Now I have people on my team and through our entire company that are asking, what can they do to support OBR? Because they really believe in the mission of OBR and the good that it's doing. So now I have lots of people helping me, and it kind of just runs as a very, very smooth process.
I can tell you that in a little background again with Operation Barbecue Relief, you say, what, 750,000 pounds?
Yeah.
So to put that in perspective, each one of our meals that go out is a 4-ounce, roughly a 4-ounce portion of proteins, 4-ounce vegetables, a starch when we have it, and something to drink when we have it. Most times we do. So, and we try to get the operation up and running within 24 hours of any major disaster. So to kind of put that in perspective, what OBR does at a time of a disaster. So fully operational and providing meals within the first 24 to 36 hours of any major disaster. And certainly, David, thank you. Couldn't do it without Seaboard. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about how the pandemic hit the restaurant industry. David, you're a restaurant owner up in the Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, South Jersey, or Central Jersey area. In February, Bureau of Labor had 660,000 restaurants that were operational. Roughly by their reports, about 3% of those had suffered some sort of permanent closure because of the pandemic. Yelp has reported that they had roughly 24,000 eating establishments through their website, through their platform, of which about 53% of those have since shut down for good. Can you explain or go into what you were looking at when this pandemic started? And if you don't mind, I'd like to share that text you sent me that one night when I was in the throes of the pandemic up here in New York City. You said, "How you doing, buddy? I think I'm going to lose my restaurants."
That's true. It's very true. I first want to say thank you for having me here as part of this panel. It's a real honor, and I'm really proud to be associated with the people on this panel. The restaurant business can continue to change. I have been in the business my entire life. I'm actually third generation, and have been in owning and operating of Famous Dave's barbecue restaurants in the Delaware Valley for 18 years. And I have watched a lot of things change over that period of time, but not like anyone else hasn't experienced this. We've all experienced a significant change that I don't think anyone could have predicted. With that being said, we shut down the dining rooms per code. We started even ahead of time having extra expenses in cleaning and chemicals and hydrogen peroxide based cleaners and all kinds of things to try and keep our employees and our guests safe. Expenses started ramping up. We ended up having to close our dining rooms, only doing takeout. And I was forced to make the most difficult decision of my business career. And I was forced to terminate over 100 employees on a single day. And it was really the toughest day of my life. I have been doing this for a long time. I have a lot of employees who've worked for me for 18 years, some longer, and I had to say goodbye to some of them. The one thing that I will tell you that I have taken pleasure in is the fact that, we believe that we've had to do these things to get to the next point. We've made the decision we had to make in front of us to get to be able to make the next decision and survive to be able to make those decisions. And, it was a terrible, terrible time. And I will tell you that I did text you that night. I did tell you I thought I was going to lose those restaurants. We had less than a week worth of food on hand, and our food supplier was not going to provide us with any more food because I was at the aged time limit of my owed receipts to them for food that I had already purchased, and I was going to be cut off. I was being cut off. So what happened here couldn't have come at a better time, and I'll stop there and we can go into that.
So before I transition into the quick, I call it a quick relationship during gray skies that we with the state of Pennsylvania and Christine Heiser, I want David and Christine to kind of talk about that first interaction that you had and where you saw the benefits of both the residents of Pennsylvania and also to Dave. I'd like to go back to David real quick and I got a question here I'd like to throw to you, Mr. Eahart. And as a procurement officer for Oregon, setting up a logistics team for products was key. What key folks do you think are important to have on the team? Did you have a plan prior to this disaster happening? I assume a plan prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, we have pretty much a process set up with OBR. And for us, some key folks are, I head up communications and marketing. So I'm the liaison to OBR and do all the overall higher level coordination. But within our team, then I work directly with someone at OBR, but then within our own team, I have what we call a product manager. That's the person that confirms about product availability, what our three processing plants are producing. And that's why we try to schedule ahead of time and get things in the warehouse. Within that then too, there's actually schedulers that are working with those product managers. And from there, then too, we have to have our shipping department in the plants. And then we have a key transportation person that actually coordinates with the driver and then works directly with another OBR person that handles all their logistics. So it's a little bit different in this situation because we were sending product directly to one of the warehouses that OBR has, and then they were actually distributing it out. But sometimes during a natural disaster, we are actually going on site to where OBR's deployment is actually at. And so we have to coordinate that transportation group is probably the most key for us. Because like I said, we have people now that understand the process, so they will move schedules around within our processing plants in the day. I've had shipping departments that have actually stayed over for another shift to get product out because we've had all the shipping slots booked that day, but we know that we need to get the product out of the plant that night so that it can get on the road. All of our plants are located in the central part of the United States. So with natural disasters, there's obviously some tornadoes, but most recently a lot of large hurricanes. We're a good sometimes 3 days before we can actually get that product. So that's why we have to start moving ahead. So it's really, those are the key ones in the transportation group. And then to make sure that there's a counterpart within OBR that helps with that coordination has been key for us.
Thanks, David. And I've seen you on a number of deployments as well as your employees. They're always a welcome sight. So thank you for sending them out. I would like to transition back over to David Marks and Christine Heiser. Christine Heiser is with the state of Pennsylvania. She's a mass care coordinator, deals with both sheltering and feeding. Is that correct?
Yeah, as part of our operational response, we've been convening not just a feeding task force, but also a sheltering task force and a disability integration task force. So we're engaged with hundreds of partners across those three operational task forces.
Excellent. And how did the initial meeting, who reached out, or did you reach out to us? How did that first meeting take place between Operation Barbecue Relief and the state of Pennsylvania?
We were connected with Operation Barbecue Relief through our Operational Feeding Task Force. And this also sort of addresses the question out of Oregon as far as who do you want on the team. From the government side, on that feeding task force, we had a lot of our state agency partners. So of particular importance, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Education, school feeding was huge, and the Department of Ag, kind of our conduit to knowing what's going on with the USDA and the various waivers and how that's affecting our charitable feeding networks. Also, the Department of Aging is our connection to those area agencies on aging throughout the counties that are feeding our senior population, among other state partners. We also are connected with a variety of business partners. I would say two of the most critical ones are the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association and the Pennsylvania Food Merchants Association. They connected us with tons and tons of retailers and other vendors who've been able to provide invaluable resource linkages. So they have been phenomenal to work with. Also on the team, we have a lot of county emergency managers, our food bank partners, our volunteer organizations active in disasters, our VOAD partners, community feeding programs. There were a lot of pop-up community feeding programs. A lot of college and university partners. As they shut down, they tended to have available resources as well. So a main function of that feeding task force is to provide for linkages between those various partners to connect everybody and to gather, what really are the unmet needs in the Commonwealth and how can we work together to meet those needs. So that's how David and I got connected, and it turns out we're kindred spirits. Who knew?
So David, when did you first? I'm gonna back up a little bit, and I just want to tell those that are listening in. David has been also involved with Operation Barbecue Relief on a number of leadership levels, and from the start since Superstorm Sandy back in 2012, I believe. Where did you draw the line, or where did you see the biggest challenge or the hurdle, and when did the light go on to reach out to Christine and her department to see if we could make this happen?
So Dana, I have, as you said, I've been involved for a long time, and really proud of the work that the volunteers have accomplished, that the organization has accomplished and grown into, and had the opportunity to be a lot of part of that. It did start as a grassroots organization, so I've been connected with my local VOAD living in Pennsylvania, specifically even micro to the Pennsylvania VOAD. I've been an active member in Southeast Pennsylvania VOAD. So I've been connected for a long time, and that's where the feeding task force connection happened through the VOADs, and ultimately, as I listened to people on the calls talk about the needs that were developing and how rapidly they were developing, I'm just so proud of this organization. And while I knew we didn't have it all figured out, I knew that we could figure out how to solve this problem. As we listened to the food bank system and the food pantries, more specifically, as they get down to the hand to mouth part of how those organizations work, they were running out of retail size food, which is how their entire system is based. And being in the restaurant industry and doing the work that we've done together at Operation Barbecue Relief, I knew the surplus of commercial sized packaging food that was out there. I was talking to those people. It's part of my business life. So I knew that we had the ability to take and repackage. How we were going to get that into the hands of individuals is really where, Jay and his operations team really came down and brought things to a head and put together the policies and procedures to make that work in a safe manner. But being, I was really lucky to have the opportunity to be in the place that I was, to hear the conversations that I was hearing, to be part of a solution, to be able to work with somebody like Christine, who, like, honestly, from a government standpoint, she's a savage. She's able to do things that other people within government weren't willing to do. And I was on the calls listening to the same conversations where government officials were waiting for somebody else to give them approval and nod. And, there are not too many people probably in the world who've actually read the Stafford Act. And I actually went and read the Stafford Act, and Christine had read it. And we had talked about, like, what does it say? The rules are already written, what is going to happen here. And it was amazing to be a part of a trust that came together to find a solution.
Well, I know it's a struggle in the disaster community and nonprofits to bridge that gap between the NGOs, the national VOAD partners, and bridge that gap with emergency managers so that we're all talking the same language and all working towards the greater good. Thank you, David. You mentioned Jay in there. You also said savage, so it reminded me to go to our homegrown savage here. Jay Collins. David mentioned the operational side. We talked about with David Eahart about what they do in the public, or I should say private part, to get ready for a disaster. They reach out, or you actually, I should say, reach out to David to get the ball rolling. How did you see, or how did you get your team ready for such a OBR's largest and longest deployment for Operation Restaurant?
I'll hit on the savage piece. I'm a retired Green Beret, and I'm a retired one-legged Green Beret. So there's some unique stories we'll hit some other day. But to talk about kind of the question, what you're alluding to here is, OBR has been around since 2011, serving what we call the one hot meal that matters. We like to say it's the power of that one meal and the way it affects a person, the way that person affects a family affects a community, and it just grows out from there. And I think I'd be really remiss if I didn't say that none of this happens in the state of Pennsylvania without Christine. And I think it comes down to audacity. It's the courage to do what is fundamentally right to make a difference in people's lives. And she built a plan, she enacted it, and David connected with her from the OBR perspective. And then it fell in my lap from an operational and programmatic approach to see, okay, we've got the need, now what do we do? OBR had never done this approach to serving meals before, at least not on this scale. We'd worked with restaurants in the past, so we had a fundamental knowledge of how this was going to work and how it could play out. Prior to engaging in Pennsylvania, we've been doing this for about 4 or 5 weeks on a much smaller scale, figured 2,500 to 5,000, 10,000 meals a day. And then for the first 4 weeks, we ramped up to 180,000 meals a week. Boom, just like that. To say that we had a plan in place, I would say the plan sounded a little bit like this. We have a runway, we have a plane, we're gonna put the wings on while we go down the runway, we're gonna take off. We knew we had good people on hand that were committed to making this happen. We knew we had the logistical capability and partners like David Eahart, where we could get product at a premium to make a difference in the lives of people that ultimately needed these meals. And we knew that this was something we could not fail at. So those ingredients, if you will, are really the secret sauce to this, right? It was that can-do attitude and the audacity to do something that absolutely had to be successful and had to be done. So once we had that established, it really came down to what are we looking for in a restaurant partner? And we found those partners. We explained to them what we were doing. We educated them on the program. We educated them on the proteins, the starches, the vegetables we were going to be utilizing, how we wanted to do this. And we custom built the labels, the boxing, the packaging, and the meals wrapped around what the needs were in Pennsylvania. I think that's something that really made it very unique. By taking that approach and finding out what the consumers needed and wanted, we were able to really negotiate a very successful price that was much lower than many others, because we were tailoring in and honing in on the need that was actually required in the state of Pennsylvania, rather than having a one-size-fits-all approach. We were really able to build a price point that made this very competitive and very acceptable for the state of Pennsylvania. Would you agree with that, Christine?
Absolutely. And I will say, despite how new and different this was for everybody, you guys were darn confident from the beginning. You got to build trust somehow. So I appreciated that. I think that really helped strengthen our relationship, because really that building of trust was so key. Everyone was very uncomfortable with this from the beginning. I mean, 3.9 million meals, like that's a lot of cash to front, even if we are anticipating reimbursement from FEMA for 75% of that. So it took a huge amount of buy-in from our partner agencies who were distributing the meals. They want shelf-stable food product in boxes that they can hand to a family. Like that's their MO. That's what they do. But this was a different kind of disaster that required different solutions, right? So we're changing our service delivery model. David already mentioned the lack of household-sized food product, our desire to not compete with our charitable feeding partners who were trying to buy that same product. So that's why it was a match made in heaven. David saw it weeks before anyone else did. So he was a visionary, chomping at the bit. We can do this thing. We can do this thing. And it you know how government, we're slow. We get there eventually, usually, but we're slow. So David was persistent and enabled us to get the buy-in from all the partners to make it happen. Now that change in service delivery model from not doing shelf-stable product to having these meals, which we actually decided to package them family style. We thought there might be a shortage in single-serve takeout containers because every restaurant in the country is doing all this takeout. So we decided to go with the family style packaging. And our partner agencies, the Salvation Army, actually requested the meals to be frozen. So that enabled a little more flexibility as far as the distribution of the meals. And that turned out to be a model that worked when we expanded to doing additional meals for our food bank partners. So that worked out. There were changes as far as the volunteers. That's already been alluded to. How do you protect the volunteers? How do you do a ding-dong ditch delivery model? You know, if you can't walk up to somebody and scoop the meal and hand it to them that way. So lots of things were different. People were very uncomfortable. But from the governance side, getting buy-in from the governor's office, Governor Wolf is committed that no Pennsylvanian go hungry. So we had that buy-in from the governor's office, and it is just a matter of getting all the partners on board to make this thing a go, and being a little brave. Go ahead and let's go ahead and assume we're going to get that FEMA reimbursement, right? Somebody has to be the first one to say, let's do this thing. So that's kind of where we came from.
Yeah, Christine, something you hit on there that I think is really key on this is leveraging your partners at the Salvation Army and Feed Pennsylvania, and just going from their desire to have the shelf stable into the frozen family style meals was a big step. And there was a lot of discomfort and there was a lot of learning. But the one thing that really brought everyone together was this can-do attitude that really precipitated from the state of Pennsylvania, from your leadership, from the governor's office, saying, look, no one needs to be hungry. We have a solution. We're going to tailor this until we find the solution. I'd say by right around halfway through week one, we found that sweet spot, and this thing really started chugging down the tracks from there. And, this family style meal concept was really an intriguing approach that made a huge difference, where you can just feed a family this great meal with these amazing proteins from people like Seaboard, and vegetables and starches, and this full-on family meal. It adds a little bit of normalcy to the lives of folks. And that's really what we wanted to achieve with this, is how do we provide a family meal when we can't go feed people as a family? And this was a very intuitive and thought out approach.
And it's a family meal that's more nutritious and more palatable than a lot of the shelf-stable meals that we're able to purchase, and less expensive, actually, than a lot of the shelf-stable meals we're able to purchase. So we have a higher quality meal that people actually want to eat, can gather around a family table for less cost than an MRE or other shelf-stable product.
And I want to shift a little bit. I would say we've had some great discussion for the first half of this. I would encourage anyone not to wait till the end. If you have any questions, if you're on in the hub or on YouTube, please send those to our backup support, and they'll be sure to get the questions to us, and we'll get them answered in the order they come. All right. I heard a lot of discussion about family, a lot about employees, family. We haven't heard from our other panelist, Kelly Aceto. Welcome.
Hello.
Where was your mindset in the beginning of the quarantine and pandemic, as far as how it will affect you personally, and kind of take that to being able to work through the whole entire pandemic, where so many Americans were not able to?
So I am a homeowner, so I have serious bills. If I don't work, I don't get paid. I did work the last shift before we closed when the governor made the call that we were closing, and it was just a weird day. Like, everyone was coming in and they were like, "We're so sorry this is happening to you. Like, good luck. Hopefully we'll see you on the other side." And like, it happened in my shift. Like, the call was made while I was working. So actually, I had heard about this restaurant thing before it became a Famous Dave's thing, because I follow Operation Barbecue Relief and I saw Stan Hayes go live about it. And when the call was made that we were closing, I said to my boss, like, I really hope that we do this, because this is crazy. And then we switched to takeout, and it just wasn't, it's not the same. It's not the same people. It's not the same money. It's not anything. And then everyone started getting furloughed. And I remember answering the phone, and it was somebody calling to speak to the manager where he was going to have to furlough them. And you could feel the tension. You could feel it was somber. You know, every time I picked up the phone, I'm like, hang on, you know, I know what's coming, but you don't. And so we went down to 10 employees. And then we finally made the switch over to the OBR work, and it was a lot of work. It was busy. It kept us busy. I was at work at 8 a.m. until 4, and we went from 10 employees to over 25. So we brought back people, and it was a lot. It, like, every day was a different challenge, a different experience, but it made the days go by, and I had a paycheck at the end instead of working in takeout and kind of just like 4-hour shifts, 5-hour shifts. I was working a full-time schedule.
Great. So whereas so many restaurant workers who were so heavily hit with this quarantine and pandemic, Operation Restaurant Relief nationally, we're focusing a lot on what we did in Pennsylvania today, but this was a national response to the tune of engaging and keeping roughly about 30 restaurants online and providing similar meals, upwards of close to 4.5 million meals. Christine, you mentioned 3.9 in Pennsylvania alone. So what, Kelly, you've been through and what you were feeling early on, so many other workers were going through the same thing. So very proud of the program to have done our small part of 300 employees roughly in 30 restaurants. That's great. Does anyone, any speaker have anything to, I'm going to go on a little bit in a second, but anything you'd like to mention right now before we transition?
Just to piggyback on what Kelly had to say, I will tell you it was a breath of fresh air as an employer to be able to bring people back. I mean, what Kelly didn't say, you know, Kelly's worked at our Famous Days for over 9 years. And, you know, we were able to bring back not just employees, but family. These are the people we work with every day. We spend as much, if not more, time with each other than we do with our own families. And we care about each other. And it was, a great opportunity and a great feeling when you think the end is coming, to be able to have a net that really allows you to bring people back to work. And I hope where you're heading with this, Dana, is, what that's done not only for, Americans, but unemployment, workers' comp, other businesses, funds into the economy, et cetera.
Yeah, you raise a good point there. This partnership, this particular response, it takes a lot of resource to put out this many meals. The trickle down effect, right, of David's company sending the product, the resources to prep, cook, store the product, to have, the aluminum pans. Christine, you and I were talking about the cost to other states, how some of the cost per meal is, triple of what Pennsylvania had paid. I don't know what they were providing in their meals. I hope it was a surf and turf. But the effects on supply chain, effects on how many other Americans were employed because of this. We're talking truck drivers, we're talking warehouse workers, we're talking, I was, the city of Philadelphia, their police commissioner was really stepped up to help with blocking off the areas that we needed for the trucks to come in and stay there for almost the whole month. Right, Dave?
That is correct.
I mean, there's just so many different levels to this operation that has engaged so many different industries. So, it's not just a two-way partnership or a three-way partnership between Pennsylvania, but rather, it's a partnership that affects and impacts a great deal of people nationally. So, Jay, where do you see? Actually, let me come back to that one, Jay. Christine, where do you see with the moving forward or for like discussions after all this, so that everyone is better understanding of the cost share and what organizations, OBR, we were talking about providing volunteer match and things that can go to that 25% cost share. Where do you see practice changing a little bit to have a better understanding or to engage NGOs or OBR in the future for disaster relief?
Well, we've been working closely with our partners at FEMA. Feeding costs fall under our public assistance declaration under Category B for emergency protective measures. So we do anticipate being reimbursed 75% for all of our feeding costs. In addition to the cost of the meals, there were some wraparound costs like for reefer trucks, fueling the reefer trucks, those sorts of things. We can use towards our cost share, for example, like overtime for staff or other COVID-related expenses. And Operation Barbecue Relief was gracious enough to share with us information that they tracked about volunteer hours and things like that that would be eligible to include with our reimbursement package for the cost share. So we're grateful for that since you're not eligible to be a public assistance applicant. So it was extremely kind of you to gather that information for us. So our admin team is hard at work putting that reimbursement package together. It's extremely complex to understand all the reimbursement, and it's hard to get an assurance that you will be reimbursed. So it's a lot of digesting of 300-page PDF documents and saying, okay, we read all this thoroughly and we're really pretty sure that we'll be reimbursed, but it's hard to get that definite, oh yeah, sure, because no one wants to put that in writing, right? So I think we're pretty much going to be in the clear on that, but yeah, it was part of the process.
David, you mentioned, and you mentioned for Pennsylvania, your restaurant in particular, the whole program around was about 300 employees, but I can't not mention the volunteers that made this happen behind the scenes as well. Nearly 1,000, close to 1,000 volunteer hours from our support group, our volunteers, that again, this would not have been possible without the support of all our volunteers working tirelessly in the background. So
it was amazing to watch. We at one of my restaurants, we actually had a center that was basically disposed to nothing but operations for Operation Barbecue Relief, and on some of the logistics and traffic and storage and holding and assembling that was going on. And it was awesome to see the volunteers come out. Some of these men and women, everything from scouring, trying to find products like a pallet, which sounds like it's not a big deal until you kind of realize how many pallets you actually need. It becomes a significant issue. To literally driving around and just trying to find them, to securing them, to driving across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have a gentleman by the name of Doug who is another real hero in this whole environment. He traveled countless miles, and it's a beautiful thing when people wrap around what's going on and they understand that they're not going to be able to volunteer in a manner in which they used to do it, and they're willing to do something different, and they understand that doing something different is going to make a significant contribution to success.
Excellent. David, what was David Eahart in moving forward with the support and partnership with Operation Barbecue Relief and Seaboard? Where do you see the rest of the year in this different environment of the pandemic and any future disasters or hurricane. We're going into a very active hurricane, or I should say we're in the middle of an active hurricane season. Has Seaboard shifted at all or changed the practice now that we're working in a different world, pandemic, post-pandemic society, and how they support OBR?
So for us, one of the biggest challenges during all this has obviously been we were going through this own crisis within our own operations. Retail demand spiked significantly right off the bat. Food service, once it dropped off a couple of weeks into it, then all of a sudden we didn't have enough product for our customers. So having available product for OBR was a challenge. Then we went into a period where we had more than enough product when food service business dropped off. And then we started to see the shift where pork production and other competitors, about 50% of the capacity was lost. And that's when everyone saw what happened with on the shelves. And we also reduced our own operations to protect our employees that were working in our plants and on our farms. So it was a really big challenging. So the thing for us is the most unpredictable part of the year, knowing that we haven't hit what we think could be a high disaster relief effort this year. Fortunately, our operations are getting back to normalization a little bit the last couple of weeks. So we're looking to make sure that we have the warehouses filled when we have available product, and when we get into a major deployment, a lot of times we have that stockpile of product. We're following pretty much a just-in-time model. So we're looking at what we can do to get product available for OBR to be prepared that's reasonable amounts that they can manage to an inventory in case they need it, so that we can get product out there almost immediately. And that's been our model, but now we're probably paying more attention to that now more than ever, because our business has fluctuated just like everyone's, and you never know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And there were a few days that when I got the call and I said, I don't have product to send to OBR. But the minute we got a product available, we went and filled up the warehouses. That was kind of, we don't want to be in that situation during a natural disaster relief effort.
I'll just add to that I never really anticipated how significant the ramp up time was to start a feeding operation this large. We have to commit to it. Okay, we're doing this thing. Then we have to procure the product, which has to be available, which is a challenge, as David just mentioned. We have to ship the product. The product is probably frozen, so we have to defrost it. We have to prepare it, package it. Maybe we need to refreeze it, and then we need to transport it to our partner agencies. So this ramp up time is like days. And we may need other products like cardboard boxes, aluminum foil pans, things that I didn't even realize OBR is going straight to the manufacturers to purchase. So that ramp up time is huge, and something that you have to kind of build into the whole timeline of how you're feeding the people.
David, I have a question which is probably for you. Are commissaries the future of restaurants, or do you see a change down the line? Maybe explain to the attendees, those that may not be familiar, on the role of a commissary in food service, how it's used, and how that's different than a full service brick and mortar. I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm outside my wheelhouse on that.
Wow, we could get into this whole cloud kitchen commissary discussion. This is like a whole nother breakout.
Okay, next.
but very interesting, Operation Barbecue Relief is looking at commissary, a commissary conversation. Actually, Jay and I have a meeting tomorrow on this exact topic. So from a restaurant angle, do I think that commissary is the way to go? I do think that there's a way to go down the commissary lane in the restaurant business. I don't know if it's a sustainable business, and here's why. I think that the world is changing so rapidly, and I look at social media and the crux of what social media has done to all of our lives. And I think one of the biggest things that social media has done that I've seen is that everybody is basically famous. It's just a matter of how many followers you have. I'm famous because I got 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 followers. And I'm this close to being discovered. So I think what social media has really done as it applies to commissary versus not commissary, I think that your traditional chain restaurants are going to have to do the commissary model, because that's the only way they're going to be able to control some modicum of quality and control the cost basis in which they work on, which has continued to shrink in my 40 years experience in the restaurant business, has continued to shrink at a rapid pace. The other side of that is that individual touch. And I'm going back to social media. People don't necessarily today want to talk to the guy who cooked barbecue. They want to talk to famous Dave himself. They want to talk to Iron Chef Jose Garces. They want to have that touch point. I went there, David gave it to me directly himself. Jose Garces gave it directly to us. They want that intimate feeling. And I think that there's going to be a continued divide where that experience becomes, is it about fuel, which will be commissary, or is it about the entertainment experience, which is more that social media? I met, I am, it was important. Look at this, look at me.
Thank you, Dave. we got getting close to the end here. We would still have time for questions. I would encourage anyone to ask questions now. All our contact information, they're in our profiles. Feel free to reach out to us after, if any questions were to come up or you watch this at a later date. I would like to spend a few minutes and have Jay explain where we see Operation Restaurant Relief fit into the future of disaster response and Operation Barbecue Relief.
All right, Dana, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm very thankful to be a part of this panel, first and foremost. We've been talking about this, but being able to share our lessons learned and go back and forth on this and just extrapolate and kind of relive what we went through and highlight this for others is an absolute blessing. So thank you for this opportunity. So what is ORR going to mean for OBR? OBR is looking at this for kind of a three-phased approach. Phase one, we'll call it near-term disaster. I think there's an absolute need still occurring or reoccurring across our country during the CV-19. As things continue to develop and outbreak, it's very likely that this continues to be utilized during the corona outbreak somewhere in the country. Whether that's shelf-stable, family-style meals, or single meals, this is a very viable and functional way to bring jobs back to the restaurant industry, augment the aluminum, cardboard box, and food cycle industries, as well as provide meals to those in need. With that, there's absolutely a way that OBR can utilize ORR to enhance our on-the-ground responsibilities during disaster. As I mentioned earlier, we generally roll in with semi-trucks full of smokers. We get tons of pork product, vegetables and starches, and we set up a camp about the size of a football field. Now we have every plan to still do that in following social distancing protocols and state and federal guidance via the CDC. We've got a way to do that safely, but in the end, our numbers may well be diminished to what we're able to put out from our standard site. So that's where the ORR really comes in. We're going to utilize the ORR as satellite locations to augment and make sure that we hit all the pockets of need during a natural disaster. There's so many people that are in need right now, and the more people we can meet, the better we can connect, inspire, serve, educate, and feed those in need. It's really a tool that augments very well with what we're doing. And the third part of this is, I think we really have to have a discussion about kind of recurrent and functional utilization of our ORR capabilities with food banks, with food shelters, with partners in industry. We've shown this can be done cost effectively. Can we do this more cost effectively than what they're doing? That's a question we have to answer. And that's something that we're actually going through right now and trying to source and solve that. If we can do that, we can make a real difference, not only in a single state, but across our country in cost effectively feeding people in need, utilizing restaurants, and the success of the ORR to do that. Does that answer your question, Dana?
sorry. Before I have any closing comments, does anyone have anything they would like to add? We have a few minutes left here. Okay. So I would, again, just like to thank the panel discussion. You guys have been working very hard over the last 9, 10, 11 weeks. It's coming very close to what this fall may throw at us with the storms. Okay. So I do appreciate your time in preparing for today's discussion, as well as your time for the discussion. I would say that for anyone watching, Operation Barbecue Relief has a great team that can open up discussions and speak with any corporations that feel that they'd like to get involved with this unique organization. You can see the contacts and more stories about OBR at www.obr.org. David Eahart, thank you so much for your time and your generous donations and support of OBR. I couldn't do it without you. Kelly, I wish the best of luck to you. I hope you're on vacation or going on vacation before the next quarantine. But thank you so much. I'm glad you're able to benefit from this outstanding program. Christine, without saying, I'm looking forward to working with you a lot more in the future. I see this as a very viable partnership and something that everyone will benefit from. Thank you. And don't see any more questions there. So thank you. And